Baptists That Amish Chick. Let's get into it.
So female friendships are one of those things that we either love them, we hate them,
or we don't have them.
Yeah, exactly. We always hear these horror stories, but then we see like shows and movies and TVs and even like girls out and about, and like we can see that friendship level there, that camaraderie, that there's something special there. I think so often female friendships are just completely misunderstood. And so that's exactly what we're going to get into today. Seeing as though that's what we've got, we're going to bring our kind of opinions on this, right? Because sometimes friendships can get so catty. Sometimes they can be out of convenience. Sometimes they can be out of literally a lack of growth. If you heard last week's episode, we talked about that. Sometimes where we just remained friends out of convenience. And so, there's a lot of different aspects to what creates and even ends a female friendship. And so that's what we're going to deep dive into today.
Yeah. I think that I find it so interesting. I think that a lot of, in my experience, I'm just thinking back, friendships with other women in the past. I think that one of the things that creates catty friendships, that creates the talking behind other women's backs, the backstabbing, the like all of those things that are kind of like they happen, right? And they're kind of what define or are kind of like one of the labels that are given to female friendships in today's world stems from women don't know their value and their worth. And so in order for them to feel that valuable or even powerful, they've got to like squat, like they've got to put other friends, quote unquote, down so that they feel better about themselves, because the culture in the past and in the present currently is not always one of valuing women as equals with men, or just as valuable as humans, right? Like, we're so valuable. We're powerful. I think that's another thing. Women don't feel powerful. And so the only way that if you make somebody feel like they're powerless, they will find a way to feel powerful, often at the expense of others, often at the expense of something else, because they've been taught that somebody has to win and somebody has to lose. There's not a win-win. There's a you win, I lose, or I win, you lose, And so
the competition comes up.
Yes, that whole competition thing, which I think can be such a big thing. It doesn't have to be, right? But like it is, because there's not enough space for everybody to win. Just one person can win, or like
there's not space for everybody to win because they're all trying to be the same person.
Yes.
And so when you stand in your
Whether
individuality
they admit it or not.
Yes.
Right. And when you can stand in your individuality, you can't help but win. And when you empower other people to stand in their individuality and in their identity and who and what they're created to be, they can't help but win either. So there is room for everyone to be that winner, that like, it doesn't have to come at the expense of anybody else.
No.
It comes at the expense of you being a fake individual.
Right.
Yeah. So what are you really losing there?
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that, I think all of those things, that we just talked about come from a root of what I just said. Like women don't feel powerful. They don't feel valued. And also, there was another point and it just went out the window. Well, I hope it comes back. Yeah, I think there's like root things that all those things come from. It's not just that is not the problem. There's something deeper going on that is the actual problem. And I think that women have experienced. So I think one of the things that women are made to do is be connectors, to create community, to like be the glue in relationships. Not that they have the primary source of it, but I think we're those nurturers, right? We create environments and we steward those environments, and we are the creators of culture within our families, within our friendships, within even the world. And so, one of the biggest pain points for women can be friendships. when it was actually meant, or relationships, when it was actually meant to be one of the strongest, you know, like your place of pain is also supposed to be your place of reign often. You look at the things that women struggle with the most, that's probably the place they're supposed to actually be reigning, or what's the not domination. It's not the word, like where they're experts, or like it's their natural, what they're supposed to be good at naturally.
Instinct.
Yeah, instinct, proud. Yeah. Anyway, so I just thought about that, and I was like, I really think that's those things. You look at what comes against women, or what they struggle with the most. You just like men, like you look at what men are, their original intent, where like what they were made to do and be, and you look at the things that like they struggle with the most. So direct, if you reverse engineer it, that's actually supposed to be the good side of that, is the strength they're supposed to be in, walking. So
when you were talking about the topic of like that competition and the cattiness and stuff, before we started this episode, I was thinking about like what would be my big thing that I look at in female friendships that have made them like a win or a lose, right? Situation, and like, excuse me, like what do I consider to like have been a relationship that really grew in the way it needed to, and then versus, you know, one that did not. And I was thinking about, it's a lot of it has to do with your own emotional health, and then looking at their emotional health, right, and maturity. Because I think so often we can go, as we're getting older, like they're like, we're 35 now, we don't, no. 35-year-old Becky's brain is still stuck in 14-year-old Becky, because 14-year-old Becky didn't learn to have 15-year-old Becky's brain, and then 25-year-old Becky, and then like and going on. And so often like we're sitting there, we're trying to have friendships like we're 14 and not like we're 35.
Yes.
And having like those type of conversations, that type of intimacy in your friendship, that sort of trust, that sort of like conversations, right? Those sort of boundaries happening and stuff as well. And so that is one thing I've learned, like my past, like I moved to Amarillo where we live now, like a year and a half ago. And I like, there were so many people, like, because at that point in my life before I moved, so many of my friendships were just through the internet, because I did not live local to, I had one friend, right? That was it, that lived local to. Everyone else is through the internet. And since I've moved here and I'm in person with people, right? I realized a few months after I got here, I was like, I have to start, and this is another topic we're gonna talk about in another episode of like, I'm like, I have to start weeding people out, because I started realizing this person's not healthy, right? This person is, it's not even about personality type. I realized, because I'm like, I can sometimes attract people that are completely different personality, but I realized that there was things that I was allowing, kind of like we talked about in the last episode of like that 20% friendship thing. Like, are you giving 20%? Where I was trying to give 80% to someone else that had 20%. And I was like fostering relationships and quote unquote friendships that were super unhealthy. I was putting in tons of work. I was frankly kind of pissed off half the time, because I had people that were coming to me and ask holes, right? Like asking questions all the time, like you would ask your friend, but then coming back and asking the same things, but never giving anything to me, right? I was always pouring into them. And so I realized that I was actually just allowing people to come around me that were really emotionally immature, right? I'm not saying I'm the most mature person, but like, I definitely know I've done work, right, on myself specifically. And I do that very intentionally to continue to grow myself emotionally, you know, as I get older.
Right.
And I was letting myself be surrounded by people who were not doing that work.
Right.
And so if you haven't done that work on yourself, like, hey, pick up a dang book, right? Like on emotional intelligence, right? And or on like self-healing or something. If you haven't done that work on yourself, that may be why you're having a hard time with friendships. Or you are going to people, right? Like, especially if you're a person that's like definitely a helper type personality, you may be going and finding people who need help, are very, very needy, and you're pouring into them, and then you're feeling like unappreciated, right? And then you're like, the friendships don't feel like they work out. And so, but if you are like going in and making sure that you are emotionally mature, that you're growing and getting healthy, seeking out the people that are also doing that, right? The people that talk about it, the ones that are like, hey, my therapist today, hey, I was reading this book, hey, I was listening to this podcast on, like, people that are open to actually talking about it, right? And like having the conversations. I realized when I get around people like that, those are people that I can actually build authentic friendships with, that we can go deep on things. We can have deep conversations where like, and deep conversation doesn't mean talking crap about deep people in your life, right? It's like, let me tell you about something like really, really deep that I'm working on in myself. And I found like that's one of the best ways, is like best things to analyze. And because that's been over the last year and a half where I'm like, oh, I need to look at people and like size them up on their emotional intelligence.
Right.
Like, are they people that are growing with me?
Right.
Am I where I need to be? Right.
Right.
Sometimes it's that too, where you're like, oh wow, this isn't working because I'm like
Right.
the sucker here.
Yeah.
Right? I'm
Yeah.
the leech happening.
Yeah.
And so analyzing those things, and if you're having a hard time making friends, are you attracting people who are not healthy, or are you not healthy yourself?
Right. And I love all of that, to be honest, because I think as you were talking, I was like, yeah, she's right, because she's Berlin and she's always right. But
And emotional intelligence I've been working on.
I know it's paying off, I can tell. But it's not always like if the person is completely healthy, because I think we're all becoming, actually not
It's that
all of
journey
us.
piece.
We're all in progress.
It's the
She's like, not all of us.
No, not
But no,
all of
it's
us. Not
true.
all of us
It's
are
true.
choosing to
We're
actually go
on a
the
journey, and some people are sitting there eating bonbons.
Exactly, and not doing a dang thing about their growing,
Their
right?
shit.
Their
Yep.
shit, yeah, exactly. And so it's not about being like, oh, there's all this pressure, like I have to be all completely healthy before I can even have a friendship.
Yeah.
It's about it's about having that growth and healing mindset always, and having that filter that you're living your life through, that priority, that value, I should say, that's probably a better word. And then looking for people who have that same kind of priority in their life, they're not perfect, but they are actively seeking out to be better emotionally and, health-wise, in their emotions and all of that. And so, because I think sometimes we can take the like, well, I have to be healthy, like I can't.
Yeah. Like I've got to be complete.
Yeah, I got to be complete before I look for anybody else,
Yeah.
or and that's never going to actually happen, and you're going to be disappointed because you're going to realize that I actually don't ever really arrive. It's just a journey that you go on, and it's a beautiful, cool one. And there's levels, like you keep going from level to level. You keep graduating, which is good. And you might reach a point in your life where you're like in a really good place, where you're like, okay, I am really healthy, and I know that, and I'm really emotionally intelligent right now. I know there's still things I can learn. Because I think when you reach the point where you're like, I know everything, is when you don't know shit. And you're actually going backwards, because there's no middle ground in this. There's no like, I'm just gonna sit here and I've reached. The minute you start doing that is the minute you start going backwards, I think, personally.
Yeah.
And so it's just looking for those people who have the same that priority and value and mindset of that. And y'all go on the journey together, and you learn from each other, and it's beautiful. And you stop being catty and petty and in competition, because you realize that you don't need anybody else to tell you that you're valuable or that you're powerful, because it all comes from within you, Anyway, so
I think we can't have Friendship Month and the whole theme of friendship without actually mentioning this piece. When they say you're most like the 5 people you spend the most time with or time around, like I can't express how true that is.
Yeah.
And so whenever you are analyzing yourself, you also need to analyze those that you're spending time with, right? And a lot of those are friends.
And that doesn't mean you're physically with them. That could be like,
like
you're on Marco Polo
it's
with
on
them.
The phone or
you're
Marco internet.
It's always their Facebook comment so that you're in, right? Like it's their TikTok you're on. It's
you're the people you're letting you influence in whatever way they influence you.
So like that's one of those things that you've really got to be. I think that's part of that analyzing piece of like analyzing yourself, and also like looking at your circle going, okay, who are my people? Would I be happy if that's how I ended up? And if not, go, okay, I need to like reassess and readjust where I'm investing my time and my effort and my energy. Because I do think it's really interesting how when you actually step back and take time and go, okay, who are the top 5 people I've spent time with this week? And like you start listing them out, all right, well, how was that time spent? Whoa. Like, I never would have like voluntarily spent all week talking about Jane's sister-in-law or whatever. You know what I mean?
Right,
Like,
yeah.
why did I spend 5 hours on the phone with her,
Mhm.
bitching about her with her?
Mhm.
Like, I
Like,
think
why
it's
did I
so,
give my
I think
life
it's
to that
so,
person?
yeah, you're like, I can't get those 5 hours back.
Yeah.
Like, I keep saying that I'm on this journey of healing and I'm on this journey of like, self-development and like wanting to be better, do better, all these things. And then,
But who am I spending my time with?
right, then, but that's what I don't want to end up
Yeah.
just sitting here on my couch drinking and like talking shit on the phone. Like,
Yeah.
that's not what I want to do with
Yeah.
my time. Right.
Yeah.
And so I think it's really interesting, like when you actually sit down, I don't know if you've ever done this, but I would definitely suggest it. It's
That's
kind of
such a good idea.
It's kind of sobering, not gonna lie. Because when you sit there and you realize you're like, I'm not happy, like, and especially it always happens when I'm like, I'm unhappy and I'm like mad at everybody and everything around me. Well, I sit there and I look at where did I invest my time? Oh, well, Leslie, you invested your time in TikTok, or you invested your time in like these friendships that don't encourage growth. They encourage mediocrity. So that like, I don't make them feel bad about themselves for staying put. Right. Like they want me to stay put too. So are you with those? Yeah. Are you with the ball and chain friends that don't want you to move? They've got you by the ankle and they're trying to hold you back.
Yeah.
Right. Like they're the ones that are sitting on the
always
journey.
done this, but we've always been friends, but
But
it's
we
the
don't
tradition,
always
but
have to forever.
Yeah.
Like I'm taking the powerful choice of getting out.
Yeah.
And like, I would love for you to come with me.
Right.
Right. Like it's one of those things I'm like, I don't have to leave you behind.
Yeah. And I like to think that you even need to tell, and I know this is
this is like internal narrative.
No,
let me explain that to the listener. Like that was internal narrative, not like, listen, Bethany, I'm leaving you behind. Like, no,
I'm
that's
going
not,
and you're staying.
okay.
Okay.
That's definitely not what we mean. Go ahead.
Yeah. No, I was just thinking like this leading into next week's episode, which is good.
Yes.
About, next week we're going to talk about, like, as you grow and change, what it looks like to like let people go, because that's a very real thing in friendship, is you outgrow people. But I think I'm actually going to save that for next week. I'm not going to say that right
So
now.
come next week to hear Bethany's profound story,
because it literally is on that subject, and I don't want to talk about that, since that's not the point of this week's episode. So come back next week if you want to hear that.
So I do have another piece. I think a lot of female friendships, or at least several that I've been a part of, there's been a lot of assumptions and not enough conversations. So we assume that anything that's said, any action that's taken, has a certain connotation. They did it on purpose. They did it to be catty. They did it to like go behind my back. Like there's always this negative assumption, right? And so what would it look like if instead we go, hey, your words in that text message hurt.
Okay, I knew that's exactly. Let's take me in Berlin for example.
Like, hey, the words you said hurt.
Yeah.
Like, and have this conversation about it, right?
I said, ouch.
Yeah, you really said, I gave you the response and you're like, ouch. And then I like gave the response back on why I did that, right? And it was a very direct, I'm usually very diplomatic about the way I say things, and it's usually in a kind way. And I phrase things that is what I usually do. But also that week I was around family and I was around people that I don't actually want to be around. And I think that kind of came out like it just, like,
and I told her
very
that
short.
But she messaged me. I was like, I told my husband what he said, and he's like, well, she hasn't been around family and around specific group of people she doesn't prefer to be around. I was like, that's true.
Yeah.
That wasn't at me. That was at her family.
But it's true. Like that's part of what you said. Like Berlin could have totally assumed that I am an asshole and like goodbye, right? Like I'm not, like offense could have definitely just taken root, which I get. Like I would have probably also been like, what the hell is happening here? Like who are you right now?
Hold up her ass.
Right? Yeah, like what, who peed in her Wheaties? Like what happened? Anyway, so like but then so after that, it kept in the back of my mind. I was like, that was really shitty, Bethany. Like, you could have done that in a better way. And I was like, well, am I taking responsibility for something that I don't actually need to take responsibility for? And then I came to the point where it's like, I just need to let Berlin know what my heart was behind it, because my heart wasn't to hurt her. It was the filter that I was seeing things through in the moment that came out. And so I sent her a Marco explaining, like, hey, this is actually what was going on.
And I
really
text her back because I process better sometimes if I'm texting back.
Yeah. So like she texts me back and she's like very like, I was like, my goodness. In that moment, actually, I was like, I am so glad I'm Berlin's friend. Like the fact that we can have this conversation and Berlin's not like butthurt. She had every right to be like, well, fuck you. Like you're just
Leslie was just like, it was a group chat with the three of us. So
yeah, and Leslie just stayed out of it. Like she didn't say anything.
As soon as she said ow, I'm like, yep. Like, because I literally was like, I said the same thing, but very kind. And you were like, it needs to be this. I'm like, was it not good enough?
No, it was good enough.
No, but I didn't even take it that you guys said the same thing.
Well, I saw it as like, I said it one way and she said it a very different way. And then I'm like, good Lord. This is like, we're talking in code, guys. I'm sorry.
No, but basically Leslie and I said the same thing in very different ways. Mine was way more abrupt and harsh, and hers was way more gentle and kind.
I don't think it could do this.
Right.
She's like, no, maybe this is for this. Oh,
yeah. And it was like, anyway, so long story short,
funny.
I was just in that moment when you sent me that text message and you're like, I was thinking about, this is probably what's going on in her life. Like you gave me so much grace in that moment when I was not my best self, and you didn't you didn't make me feel bad. I was already feeling crappy, you didn't have to make me feel bad. I already felt
the ouch was enough.
Yeah.
The ouch text was enough.
Yeah, it really was. And like I think that's like, I was so grateful in that moment. I was like, okay, this is one of the signs that I'm in really good relationships, is when people
it's not brushed under the rug.
No, it's not brushed under the
we'll
rug.
just push this under here, and then the next time something else happens,
right,
6 months from now, we'll brush that one under, and then pretty soon you're tripping over the rug, and then you don't even want to see the rug,
right? And you want to burn the rug, and you're like, fuck you and fuck this relationship, and I'm done, right? Like, because to the point you were making, Leslie, of like, we assume things and we don't have conversations, and because it's really easy, it's sometimes easier to assume things.
It's always going to be easier to make an assumption than to have a
Yes.
conversation, because we're never taught how to communicate. When were you ever taught how to communicate in a relationship?
Never.
Let's be honest, our first relationship was with our parents, really.
Mhm.
And it was because I said.
Yep.
So often. Not all parents are like that, but like so often, at some point, every single person has had a relationship, whether it's a teacher, Sunday school teachers.
Well, then I mean, you're basically an only child, but like we have siblings, right, close to our age, where it's like you do kind of like, you get in a fight and you brush it on the rug, but it's also different when you're family, because
right.
Sometimes you're irritated living together, right, and stuff like that. But like those are your first relationships, and you don't learn that level of intimacy. Because that's what I was thinking as you were saying. You weren't done, and I just interrupted.
Oh, it's okay. Go ahead.
Okay.
You interrupted. The thought's gone. Sorry.
We gotta let Leslie finish her thought, or it doesn't come back.
It's done.
But the thing is when you get the actual intimacy in relationships where you really know someone, like if you think through like what Bethany and I like went through, this was like last week too. Like
it was
like I was able to be like, know Bethany well enough to know that like there's one group of people that when she's around, sometimes she gets a little salty afterward and she needs 2 days alone. Like, and then there's another group where it's the same thing. I said, she's been around both those groups, like
in the same week,
right?
The only break she had was driving to the other one.
Yeah. and so I was like when you know someone well enough, you're able to analyze those things, right? And to be like, all right, I know this about this person and know them well enough. And then like me to even be able to like say that to her where she knows that about herself, but maybe I don't know if you'd already thought about that.
I hadn't thought about it until you said it, and I was like, oh yeah, that's true.
And then because you're just in the moment doing the things, like she was still there at the event and everything, right? In the moment around some of the people. And so it's like you're able to help each other, like, hey, like you were around these people, and sometimes you get like this, like where you just get people that whatever, right? Like, and just knowing your friends' reactions to certain things and knowing how to bring it up to them. And like I said, be like I'm giving you grace because I know you've been around, but if you just been home, I might have been a little more mad.
What's going on?
You better knock at your door.
But like that's really knowing your friends well and like continuing to learn those things, or learning, like I know we have a set of friends that talked about, like there was a phrase that they used, like that are kind of mentors to all of us, that like one was like, I really hate it when you say those words. I don't know if you know who I'm talking about, but I don't know if you know it, but you know them.
You know them.
But like they had to like have a conversation, like when you say that, I really can't like can't handle it. And so like had to have a conversation and talk it out, because sometimes it's a phrase that like triggers you from something from your childhood or something, like and that happens in all relationships. Like, you know, like there's certain things that my husband will say. I'm like, but grandma used to say that when she was mad when we weren't hurrying enough as grandkids, and I need you to not say it, you know? Like, and so like knowing those things about your friends and which friend it is, like that's where the true friendship comes in. And but like, hey, this triggers something in them and just bothers them, like I'm going to be aware of that and like know them on that intimate level to where I can remember that about each individual, you know, person in my life.
Yeah.
Well, and you're never going to get to that point and understand things unless you have that openness to communicate.
Right.
So it comes back to that, like less assumptions, more communication, because you couldn't have gone, and it's not an assumption when you go, you've been around this group of people, like that brings a whole other level of stress.
No,
it's not an assumption.
I know that because she's told me
wisdom.
That. Yeah.
At this point.
Yeah.
Right. So like, it has to be like, we have to get rid of the assumptions, and increase the communication for sure.
Yes. That line right there would take care of 90% of the problems in women's relationships.
All relationships.
Well, all of us.
I mean, let's be honest.
Exactly. But since
We're talking about girls,
yeah.
so we're talking about us. No,
take that and apply it to like all your relationships.
Yes,
you know?
absolutely.
Yeah.
And I want to touch on this because we've mentioned it in passing. Even I think last week we mentioned it. We talk about like the friendships of convenience. And so I do want to hit on this because I think so often, and the example I think you said as we were like discussing what we were going to talk about on this episode, we mentioned like moms who, and I don't know if this was a story in my head or if you actually said this out loud, but it's almost like, it's almost like the moms in the play group. Well, I need a friend. And so I'm just going to latch on to whoever's available at the PTA meeting.
That's why I hate moms groups. Because you moms groups and like married couples groups and stuff. And I'm like,
I think you just end up trauma bonding.
Like single friends as a married person. It's true. Yeah.
It's true. I mean, really, I think you end up trauma bonding because you're like, oh, my kid didn't sleep. Oh, girl, mine either.
Yes.
How about that friendship?
And they never talk about themselves or anything about them. It's always about
the kids. And I think that also comes down to so often we don't have identity, and then we have this little human that has taken over our world, and so it's all about them. We find our identity. A lot. We like so often people lose it. And that's definitely not the case. But I think it needs to be said, like friendships of convenience. Think about it. Like reassess those, right? Like here's the deal. I think the PTA or the mom group can be the thing that's that first stepping stone, like we mentioned last week. That's that first thing that you have in common just to get the ball rolling. But then the communication needs to take you somewhere else. It's got to take, it's got to be more than PTA. It's got to be more than your kids being on the same soccer team or being like the homeroom mom or whatever bullshit y'all got going on now. Like I can't handle it. As the nanny, I ended up doing a lot of it, and I'm like, I can't. Too many to do. I don't know. Because it starts when they're like 3. I'm like, calm down.
We're trying to potty train still.
Yeah.
Oh God, that's coming. Just anyway, there's trauma there. No, but I think reassessing those friendships as like the same thing as the five people you spend the most time with
Mhm.
are who you're most like. Like
Mhm.
they're going to give you a really good idea of like where you're at as an individual.
Mhm.
And I'm like, if I'm not looking forward to where I want to be in some of those people,
Yeah.
like I need to reassess or find more of those
Right,
people.
right,
Like who else do I want to cultivate friendship with?
right.
And not that I don't want to be friends with these people. It's just I want more for myself, right?
Well, it's okay to not want to be friends with them even.
Yeah.
It's okay to be
Mhm.
like, I don't actually want to be friends with them. And I'm not going to spend time with them because they're not the kind of people that I want to be like.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. You're not devaluing them. You're being clear on where you want to go and what you want from your relationships. And if you're not clear on that, it doesn't go well for either one, you or them, right?
Mhm.
And it never ends well usually. And I think to that point you said, Berlin or Leslie, getting clear on what you want in a friendship is probably a really good idea before you start go looking for them.
Mhm.
Like, this is the kind of person I want to be around, like the goals they have in life, the things that they're going after, the values that they have, all those things, right? And then when you are clear on that, you can very quickly like, yep, that's the person, kind of person. Nope, that's not. And you stop wasting time on relationships that aren't beneficial for either person. And that just pull everybody down, exhaust you, whatever the negative thing is that happens, right? And so take some time. Like if you haven't taken the time yet, take some time to be like, this is the kind of person I want to be around.
And like write it down.
Yes, write it down.
So can I be the frequency girl for a
Yes.
second? Okay.
We love
So
frequency
this
up
is-
in here.
This is one of those things that I've actually learned is once you start cultivating a frequency, an idea, a mindset, a thought, fill in the word that resonates best with you. Like writing that down and focusing on it is going to change the way other people perceive you.
Yeah.
And here's the deal, it's a magnet. So people with that same thing are going to be attracted to you. So if you're tired of the people that are being attracted to you, upgrade yourself, and the people that are coming in are going to be upgraded as well.
Yes, 100%.
So like they said, write it down, get an index card, write down the things and read it every day.
And
like-
be open to having it. Like if you want to change it, you can change it. It's not like,
Right.
this is the only thing that, because
Well,
it's
and
probably going to change.
even at the level of this is what I want to see of myself.
Right.
Get a card and go, I want to be that person that is interested in personal development. I want to be a reader. I want to be like a high value friend. Like write down those attributes that you want from yourself, because it's also going to attract more people into you, right? And things are naturally going to take care of themselves that way.
Yes. And even like take the time to figure out what those words mean to you, because a high value
Language
friend,
is important.
yeah, high value. If I say a high value friend, I know what I mean,
Right.
But when I say that to Leslie, she instantly thinks about what that means to her, right?
Yeah.
And so I think taking that
Break it down.
break it down. What does this actually mean to me? What are the words that describe this high value friend? What are the words that describe being a self development person? What are the words that describe being a person who knows who they are outside of their roles as mom or wife or business owner or whatever, right? And getting really, really clear on what that means for you will keep things from being ambiguous, from like bringing people into your life where they're like, I like want high value friends, and then they tell you what that is, and you're like,
So like shopping.
That's
That's what I was talking
That's
about.
high.
yeah, that's high. No, that's not high for me.
Yeah. I keep seeing too, like we're talking about writing it down, this like target drawn out where it's like,
Yes.
the small circle in the middle.
Do you remember the
bigger
like
circle on the
brainstorm?
outside. Yeah,
Yeah.
and then like a bigger circle, even like where it's even like maybe even writing down, do a version where it's like, here's the people in my life, here's where they actually fall. Like, here's my tight friends, here's my acquaintances, here's people that just exist, right? Like
Right.
people that I know their names at church and that's it or something.
Right.
But then do the same thing for like the qualities, right? Do another version of it where it's like, here's the qualities that I really want in those close friends. And then look at those close friends. Do those close friends have that quality? Or do they not? And that
Then
will help you
reassess
analyze.
where those friends fit in.
Yeah, like do you need to
how
put more
close or how
space?
far?
Do you
There's
need to-
actually, I read a book, and that's actually an exercise in a book.
Your
Your husband's probably got it. on the
Probably.
bookshelf
It's probably
or
on our
something about
shelf.
it. Let's be honest.
Yeah, he's probably showed it to me. That's why it's in my brain. But like, I'm like, you may even need to go to some of your friends and be like, wait, wow, like I realized that like this is really valuable. Like I said in the last episode where I'm like, I want my friend to know that like if I text someone, and they don't text me back, like I may text back and, hey, like I had a friend the other day, she's got 3 kids, right?
Yeah.
Little kids. And
That's
I
the
was like,
grace
we were
piece.
supposed to get together, and I was like, she didn't text back. I was like, hey, what works for you? Like 2 days later, she's like, sorry, I forgot. I'm like, I figured you did. Like, you got 3 kids running around. Like, you're homeschooling, right? And like, I knew she forgot and got busy, but I knew she cared enough about me to where she wanted to do it, right?
Mhm.
So like, it may look like, okay, I have my list of friends here. This person's in my middle circle. Here's my list of attributes I want a friend in middle circle. Maybe you need to go take a list of attributes, and not that you're trying to change this person, but I may go to someone and be like, hey, can you please text me back? Like, I've texted you 4 times and you haven't responded. I really don't feel valued as a friend when that happens, and let them know that, because to them, it may not be a big deal. Like, I do have one friend that, like, I know she's not going to text me back. She will not text me back. I call her 4 times and I will call her husband, but I just know that's her, right? But then there's other people that have been in my life where I'm like, I'm obviously not important to them, right? Her, I just know she calls no one back and texts them back. So like, I just know that it's not personal, it's everybody. But like, there are other people that I'm like, I know you're on your phone every time I see you. So like, I'm just not a priority in that way, right? So like, even communicating that, like, not that you're trying to change people, but if there's something that's important to you, communicate that to your friend. That is what you need. Like, hey, when I tell you something's wrong, I need you to have a little bit of empathy for me, and like, you don't do that. Right. And then if they don't show up in that way after a few times, then maybe okay, maybe they need to go to that outer circle a little bit more. Maybe don't stay in that tighter circle. So then you can actually like have a plan for it. Like, we plan so many things in our life. Why are we not planning our closest relationships and putting like we put standards, a list of what we want, like in a man or in a woman or whatever, but then friends, we're just gonna like friends, we're gonna be like, oh yeah, our kids go to school together.
It's a person, I found one.
Yeah, like we're the same age, or hey, we went to high school together. Like, be strategic.
That is so true. And I'm actually thinking about a relationship in my life right now as you're talking. I'm like, oh, well, I think we need to reassess that one. This is good. Like, it's just making me think like, okay, yeah, this is a really good conversation, because I think that I've had people in my life who are like, I have expectations from being in a relationship with you. And the word expectations always feels like instant pressure to me. Because if I'm honest, I don't like the word expectations. And I think it's because of what I associate with it. Because for me, expectations are always it's like we're just waiting for the other shoe to drop. Yeah, like a to-do list, or like, well, we're gonna see, and then like, it's like a whole, like, I feel like I constantly have to prove myself to that person.
Yeah.
If they have expectations, right? And I realized just now that I'm like, oh, I think that word expectations for that person means what I would call values. Like, these are the values I have for a relationship. These are the things that I'm looking for. And it's and I think that it's, again, language, literally that whole, like, what means something to you in that way doesn't mean the same thing. And I need, being aware of that now takes away that pressure I've felt of like, oh, and actually, that's not actually what they mean when they say that. They actually mean this, which is this, what I would label as something else.
Yeah. Which, I mean, I know in our earlier episodes, I think at the very beginning, we did a lot, like an episode where we talked about, like, I don't think this was the title of it, but like, we talked about like defining what your words mean to you and knowing what they mean, because people have completely different meanings to words.
Well, and then think about how many words, like, we always talk about me with nice and kind, right? Like, I mention that literally all the time. But I think it's been mind-blowing once you go back, and it wasn't a biblical sense, I believe, like when you read the word, like, what does the word actually mean? Like, what did the root word mean? Because the roots of words are still very present. And so I think you'd be really surprised when you like start making this list of things you like, these values of a friendship or even of yourself. Go look at what you're actually asking for or wanting to see. Because I think language is so interesting. People would talk about word studies for the longest time, and I'm like, that sounds awful. Like, that sounds horrible. I want nothing to do with it. And now I've become such a nerd. I'm like, I will look up everything, because I'm like, what did I just say though?
Right.
Because that's a word I've used a lot, and it's come up a lot lately. So I need to go actually look into this. Like, what am I actually saying? And I'm like, oh, you really got to shift your language. Just because that's a word that, like,
Yeah.
is trendy or whatever,
Right.
you know.
Doesn't mean that it's the best word for the thing that you're
Mhm.
using.
Right.
Or, this is the thing, and we see it so much, is I love words too. Communication, that whole piece, like what words you're using and what you're communicating are sometimes not the same thing.
Yeah.
We think words are communication. They aren't.
Oh, they're not. Yeah.
Communication is so much more than words, but words create culture, and culture creates, like, you know, systems, and like these things that we see physically. And so that's why I think words and communication are so powerful, because the words bring clarity and definition, right? They put structure to something, and suddenly it becomes something, and you're building something with your words, and then it starts manifesting in your life, and whether good or bad. And suddenly it's like, where did this all come from? Oh, it started with the words.
Started with that one tiny word.
We started with the words we started using, and it started building this thing, and suddenly we have these results because of the words we used.
So save time. Just make sure the words are right in the beginning.
Yeah.
That way you don't have to tear shit down and start.
Sure. Anyway, that was kind of a bunny trail, but
Yeah,
I think
it
it's good. Like,
Well, I mean, that's good for the whole communication piece, right? Because like talking about making assumptions and like all of that. And, you know, we've talked about like being able to actually resolve things with friendships, and not just like pushing it under the rug, because so many times there's words. What I keep thinking of is in the last episode we recorded, you talked about how honor was like something you need in a relationship. Well, some people would be like, I need to be respected. Well, if I said the word respect, I know all three of us are going to go, like, we're going to throw up on our shoes, because we see respect as someone who's in authority looking at someone who's below them, quote unquote, being like, you need to do what I say that you need to do, because I'm in charge, and because I want you to, and you need not ask questions. Right.
it's like it feels like someone's imposing their will on you.
Yes.
And
Whereas
making you do something.
honor, we all know, like honor, we're like, I see you and you're different, and I'm very different, and I can see that person, they're completely different, and I'm different.
And we value it.
Yeah. And I would never do what they're doing or do it the way they're doing it. They would never do what I'm doing the way I'm doing it. But I honor, like, I am excited, and I value the fact that they are taking on that piece and doing that thing and living that way. Either so I don't have to, or because someone needs to, or because like whatever it is, like it's completely different. Whereas someone would be like, I need respect in a friendship. And if someone said that to me, I was like, hold up, honey, maybe we shouldn't be friends then, right? But they may mean honor. So like communicating that well and having those conversations to be able to, when you have like disagreements, right? Things that it doesn't mean that you're arguing. It's just someone may have said something that you find offensive because you completely disagree. Like being able to talk that out and go, what do you mean?
Yes.
Can you tell me how you define it? Like just things like that in a conversation. Look at your friend and go, can you tell me how you define that word? Like what that word kind of means to you? Because I don't think I'm understanding what you're saying. Because I think maybe I have a different definition. Just things like that. That's going to build that intimacy in the friendship.
Take care of so many like offense and like feeling bad, like missing things and reading into things and assuming and all those things. It just takes that all out, because you're actually asking the person to tell you what they meant, which takes all of that away, because you're like, oh, in your mind you're like, oh, okay, what you're saying right now is the word I would use for that. Okay, I understand now.
Right.
You know, so yeah,
because what made us in different chapters of the book got us on the same page with asking that one question.
Yes,
right,
exactly. Yeah,
it's good.
All right, you guys have anything else?
No, I think we wrapped that up pretty well.
I do want to.
This is like, I do.
I can make it quick though. So I think it's very important to not confuse communication with like gossip, right? Just because you sit there and talk about people doesn't mean you communicate. And so I do feel like that little piece needs to be like thrown in there, because we're like, well, we communicate all the time. We get together and neither of us shut up.
About
was it meaningful? Like, yes, exactly. About what, or about who, or about, you know, so I think that piece needed to just be dropped in there.
That actually ties into something I was thinking earlier, but I didn't want to interrupt for once. I didn't want to interrupt.
That's
but
nice.
no, like
Thanks.
we've mentioned in this episode and the last, like, are you around people that are talking about people? I have been around people that literally are like, can't have a full conversation because you can't mention anyone that exists, because then you're talking about people, right? Like I feel like it was like that way, like in the church I grew up in, where it was like, I mean, everyone talked about
It's the extreme black.
everyone talked about, but it's like things like, I just think, for example, when I walked into this, like this afternoon, you guys were having a conversation about a friend of ours who has some things that like she's working through, right? Some like major things. And we were having a discussion. Something negative was said about someone, but this also had to do with the safety of our friends' kids.
Yeah.
Right. So in that conversation, we weren't gossiping. We're being like, hey, you should know this information because we need to protect
These kids.
We need to like, and so it's different if you're like, hey, let's just talk shit about Sharon.
Like,
because
guess what I know.
yeah,
right.
like Sharon did this and Sharon did that and this happened. Can you
Sorry,
leave
Sharon.
it and just
Yeah.
If there's
Whoever
Sharon
you
that
are.
listens, we're not talking about you. Unless maybe we are. Like, I don't know.
I mean,
But like-
but
But like that's the difference. Is like, are you talking about someone just to be like, hey, I gotta tell you this crap that happened? Or like, is it like, hey, here's a piece of information that actually needs to be known and not just for the sake of so we can pray for them.
Yeah. Pray for them.
That's your call.
That's a whole other episode on its own.
Like, is there an action that you get to take behind it of like, hey, actually, you may want to be careful in setting a boundary with this person because here's my experience, right? And it's not for the
Right.
sake of like you bitching about it, but it's
No.
like, I actually genuinely care about you, Bethany. And so I want to watch out for you, just so you know,
This person.
this person has, you know, I've known this person longer than you, and they have had a habit of doing this to this many
Right.
people, just so you know, right?
Right.
And then the conversation ends there. So I think it's good to know.
And
where
then it's
that
like the
line
ball's in
is.
their court.
Yeah.
Right? Like, now you get to decide what you do with that information.
Right.
I'm
Right.
not going to go back and go, did you do it? Did you
Right.
fix it? Did
Right.
you,
Yeah.
you know, like,
Yeah. I think
There's-
the
there's
whole
pieces there.
yeah, I think the whole comes back to like, what's your heart behind what you're saying?
Mhm.
Why are you saying it? And that will take care of a lot of gossip. It will also bring clarity. Like, am I saying this because people need to know this for the sake of safety or like whatever? Or is it because I just want to feel better about myself? And so I need to like put somebody else down, talk shit about them so that I feel better about the situations in my life.
Right.
Or if I'm jealous of them, I have to like bring them down a few notches because, you know, how dare they? When it's like in that case, you're really giving your power away and you're not realizing that, you know what? They're really good at that because they were made to do that. Find the thing that you're good at and go do that. And there's no competition. So anyway. Yeah, that's all.
That was my only thought. I had to
Okay.
add that piece.
Okay. I don't have anything else now.
Okay. All right, guys. Thank you so much for listening. We'd love to hear you share like what some of your values are, some things you've learned in building relationships, or even if you're like, hey, I am a grown-ass woman who has been in that place where I'm like, I can't find friends. We'd love to hear your stories and stuff. Feel free to email us, comment on our stuff, whatever way you like to do so. But we hope this is helpful for you. And friendship is our topic for the whole month of September because it is national, international. I don't know. It's
Sure.
Friendship Month. The internet said it was, so we're going with it.
Yeah, Google said so.
Google said so. So we are rolling with that. And see you next time. Bye.